Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Wrap, brought to you by Michigan Medicine Headlines. I'm Dan Ellman with the Department of Communication.
And I'm Jeremy Fallis, also with the Department of Communication. We have a heck of a show for you today as we discuss HECS, the Healthcare Equity Consult Service, which launched last year here at Michigan Medicine.
Now, before we get into that, figure out what the heck we've been talking about on recent episodes of The Wrap. You can find the shows on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any other podcast hosting platform. New episodes can also be found on the Michigan Medicine YouTube channel and as part of the Headlines Week in Review.
All right, let's bring in three members of the HECS team. First, let's have each of you introduce yourselves and the role that you play with the Healthcare Equity Consult Service. Why don't you go first, Kamal?
Okay, my name is Kamal Ayubi. Sounds like IUB. And I have a background in spiritual care for the past 16 plus years. And I am one of the program managers of the Health Equity Consult Service.
Thank you, Kamal. I am Sam Gaia. I actually am a social worker by training. I've been at Michigan Medicine through my internship and, thankful to have started on a clinical unit after that. And I am also one of the program managers here on the Health Equity Service.
And my name is Priyanka Shaquille Brown. I am also a social worker by training. I have been at Michigan Medicine for 8 years now, with one more year before that for my internship. And I am the third program manager with the Healthcare Equity Consult Service.
Outstanding. Well, thank you to the three of you for joining us now. You keep mentioning the Healthcare Equity Consult Service. Can you explain briefly what that service is? I know it's about a year in now here at Michigan Medicine. What is the service?
Fantastic question. And I can imagine we get this all the time. What is health equity? What's our service do? How are we impacting others? And let's just start with some of the formal definitions of health equity. And it's really making sure that all of our patients and families are getting just, fair care. So the care delivery that we have, are we making sure that we're giving that to every single person? And we can take that a step farther too. A lot of times research has shown that health inequities, for example, are really things that we can control within our health system, within, us as providers, clinicians giving care. So we also focus on an interpersonal level, and how can we ensure that our providers are giving equitable care to everyone, and not necessarily finding, but discovering together, what that looks down, potentially where the breakdowns are, and being an avenue to discuss that, is something that hasn't been done before. So just a little snippet, but I defer to my colleagues to add to that and, bring more wisdom for us to talk about.
Yeah, I think I'll build on what Sam has said. I think, all three of us could probably talk all day about healthcare equity and what that means. I think the purpose of our service really is twofold. It's to kind of elevate our patients' lived experiences, what they are experiencing, what they are bringing to the table, the historical context, generational contexts that they are bringing into their healthcare, but also to partner with our staff and our providers and act as a resource to help provide equitable care and ensure that we really are upholding our institution's values and mission to provide, belonging, safety, access to all of our patients. So I think we see ourselves as a resource and as a partner to talk about issues of healthcare equity and to elevate those experiences and hopefully create systemic change.
I think a part of people's lived experiences are also their strengths, their wisdom, their insight into their own lives, their own bodies, their own health. And sometimes that can get glazed over or bypassed by all the knowledge that we think we have, all the understandings that we might have both clinically, but also like in our different lived experiences as well. So it's sometimes like building that bridge to the heart and soul of a patient or a family that can get lost, and there's opportunity there. We're a reflective service. We are a service where providers, patients can come and reflect on what's going on, trying to deeper understanding, and hopefully be more intentional about how we write about patients, how we talk about patients, how we serve their needs, how we partner with them. So we're here to help folks hopefully gain insight and wisdom, in terms of where and how they're providing care.
And while the service has only been in a formal state for a year, obviously some of these services were happening even before HEX began. But what over this past year, now that HEX is a thing and is entrenched, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned from the service?
Yeah, so I appreciate you giving us the credit for us having formally existed for a year, because really we went forward as a permanent service just this past April. So prior to that, we were only a pilot program. And, I think one of the key, not one, but I think just the fact that we were able to move from a pilot to a permanent service so quickly showed the need for something like this, for a service that addresses health equity and just kind of disparities that we are seeing within our healthcare system. I think some of the key lessons that we have learned, we've definitely had emerging themes of, types of issues that patients are facing, bias, discrimination, those types of things. But thinking, in terms of key lessons, it's really just taking the time to, and Kamau can talk about this more because this is kind of his bread and butter, but creating these safe spaces, coming to these conversations with compassion and authenticity to have some of these conversations that really are difficult and make people uncomfortable, but without working our way through those kinds of uncomfortable, difficult conversations, we can't get to the other side of, addressing healthcare inequity. And so I think for me, and then I'll stop talking and let my fellow program managers kind of add in their 2 cents. But one of my biggest lessons has been to just pause and listen, not just to our patients, but also to our providers, and really try to get a sense of empathy and understanding for where everyone is coming from, and then using that to further kind of communication and facilitate discussions amongst parties so that we can all kind of collectively come together to come up with plans, whether it's a treatment plan for an individual patient or systemic issues that we need to be addressing.
I'll definitely add to that. And I know, Kamal, we're waiting to hear about your compassion exercise and just how amazing that has been to teach to our teams. But I'll add with that, we definitely have a way of describing our families and our patients that we take care of. And a part of that is clinically appropriate, right? We have to do handoffs with our providers when they assume care and so forth. But we've also recognized a very clear and pervasive theme that our language itself can be quite stigmatizing and hold some bias. And that can also speak volumes to that person's admission and even future admissions to come. So we've already had some really great discussions with hospital leadership and different department leaderships on what does that look like and how can we challenge the narrative that we're sharing with our colleagues and coworkers who are then taking care of this person. So we could talk all day about that within itself, but that is definitely something that was clear that we've noticed in our work thus far.
I think an interesting subject, and I appreciate everyone's comments, is that medicine is not ahistorical. It's connected to history. And an interesting way of looking at that, for example, is like the opioid crisis, for example, right? That there is a problem of opioids and addiction and dependency, which is a medical, it has roots with perhaps the way medicine has been practiced in recent history that's really catching up with us. But because we have certain narratives about different populations, the social constructs of race have been tied with like certain types of behaviors or identities that may or may not be true. It gets confusing. So sometimes people assume things about people and get the histories mixed up. Like there may be people who are dependent on opioids because they have long-term pain that is simply that, and they're now dependent on certain opioids. But people can like make up narratives that, oh, this person is drug seeking, for example, and they're really in chronic pain and they need a specific type of attention. and context to understand who they are, and that they're not just being labeled as addicts, but addiction and the medical aspect of it and the historical aspects of it, sometimes it gets a little bit tied together. We build stories about people, and those stories follow people. And really, that can create a situation we miss the actual human being and what they're going through and how to help them. And also to see their strengths, to see they're actually doing remarkable under the circumstances of their lives, rather than being non-compliant or a bad patient or a problematic patient. They're actually coping with things that you wouldn't wish on anyone based on historical reasons, structural reasons that are built into different aspects of society that we live in. That's one example.
Yeah, what are some sort of common themes that you tend to find when it comes to consults with your team?
Stigmatizing language, pain, the perception of pain in different groups. Shared decision making is huge. Like Kamal and Priyanka both shared. How can we talk about medicine without talking about history, without talking about the events that led us to feel distrustful of our providers or to not feel safe or seen or accepted in certain areas, right? So how can we have all these discussions without addressing where it started? So those are a few that just come off the top of my head. And what are others thinking? Yeah.
Well, I just have a quick follow-up to that. When you say
Yeah.
stigmatizing language and the type of consults you get, is that something that might work both ways, where it's the provider talking to a patient and then the patient talking to a provider? Because I know that, like you mentioned, there's sometimes is sort of this perceived notion of, oh, the healthcare provider isn't looking out for me in certain populations. Does it sometimes work both ways?
It's interesting that you put it that way. I can imagine so. We're human. We are absolutely human. And provider, patient, we all have our different experiences and our own shared identities, or not, right? We all come from different lived experiences. So I can imagine in that exchange,
Yep.
it's going back and forth. And, the beauty of our service, like Priyanka mentioned, is that we can see both sides to that and lead with the empathy and understanding that we're both feeling something here. And how can we navigate for the shared goal of everyone?
I think along those lines, another theme, and a lot of what we've noticed is that a lot of these themes kind of intertwine and are intersecting. One of the things, and I think I've said this earlier, is just communication and facilitating that communication. I think, again, not just words that we talk about our patients and describe our patients, but also just the different ways in which people communicate. Often that is lost in translation, both figuratively and literally. And so, like, really being able to sit down and kind of hear exactly what the meaning is behind the words that people are choosing, and helping link those between patient and provider. Because sometimes what we'll find is that what providers think they are telling to the patients did not interpret that way, or what patients are saying is interpreted by providers a certain way, which isn't actually what they meant. And so I think facilitating some of that communication really helps with some of the other themes that we have seen in terms of documentation. We've certainly seen different themes on the pediatric and adult side, because there are, different nuances and things to each side that I think is also something that we are learning to navigate. And so just having that openness again, I think once we start seeing those themes, we can kind of pull that in and take some of those kind of core principles and values that we're trying to kind of instill and, create a culture shift on, and use that to kind of move forward in furthering health equity.
Yeah, it brings up the subject, like Priyanka was talking about, like grounding ourselves. We live in a society and perhaps an industry, that maybe at its root, it has these ideas like healing, healthcare is there in the language that we're about healing, we're about care and compassion, but we might feel pressures or volumes of demand on ourselves that interrupt our ability to feel like we can care. And so it's like reclaiming ourselves, grounding ourselves in intentionality, in this idea which we bring into the realm. You know, we know that self-care is important for all of us, but it can kind of it can kind of get like loaded, like, oh my God, I'm not being good enough. You know, I'm not taking good care of myself. I feel overwhelmed. So like we deepen our view of like language, for example, or our use of language, and we bring in ideas like soul care. You know, how do we go beneath the surface and take care of our inner selves? And that could mean a lot of things for a lot of people, but recognizing what does that mean to us to take care of our own souls, and that we're taking care of other souls. We're taking care of people who belong to a broader sense of meaning, whether it be their family ties. What does this person mean to their children? What does this person mean to their um, relatives and so forth? And also, what's the shared meanings that we can find so that people can get connected, right? It doesn't mean you have to go through all the same things, but how do you really recognize, whoa, this person, so you have the compassion aspect, you have the authenticity aspect. What's authentically going on? Let's find a way to get to the truths that will help, you know, good medicine happen between people. The safety component, the vulnerability component. Are people coming in guarded? Are people afraid, you know, or having like experiences negative before coming to the hospital? Their other relatives may have experienced. So how do we just, again, get insightful and you know, grounded in compassion, authenticity, and step at a time build some healthy quality relationships so that communication goes even better. So there are a lot of themes in health equity. These are some of them. There's systemic issues that, you know, are coming online, just like in terms of, you know, one, communication and documentation, but just people becoming more aware that some of the science that has been perpetuated, for example, you know, pain thresholds or kidney function and things, these things actually have within them historical biases and a lack of factual evidence that people are reforming even now. So even though we're not always addressing that, we're part of that conversation. We're part of trying to level set and say, okay, how do we come at this justly, fairly, and compassionately?
So let's switch gears for a quick second and let's talk about the actual, like what actually happens. What are the expectations that patients have when the consult service is called? Take us through what that experience is. And I know it's not identical for everybody.
I mean, interestingly, the majority of our referrals come from staff. As you know, patients are starting to find out about us, but it's usually staff that notice, something just doesn't seem right. The way that this person or family is being discussed just doesn't sit right with me. We need to look into this. We need to reflect on why this is happening. Again, one thing I want to share is that we live in a society, we've inherited narratives and we inherited identities that we didn't create, but they're still affecting people day by day. So it's not like this is about blame or shame, but it's about finding our way back to our humanity, finding our way back to insightful connection that leads to good care. So that expectation it's actually, this is very new for people to talk about how these themes of, like, for example, racism or sexism play into medicine. We know that it's a factor, but now how do we deal with it? Oh, are we going to get like a tag like, you get an F? No. We're going to try and slow down, and maybe Samantha or Priyanka can share examples.
Yeah, just as Kamau was saying, I think actually we have found that most of our consults have come from staff. Whether or not, there actually is an equity issue, but that is what we are here to kind of help think through and talk through. When we do get a consult, consults can be placed to us. They can either be confidential or, in the sense that we will know who the referral is coming from, but we don't necessarily let anyone else know where that consult is coming from. Or if folks feel comfortable, we will, say this is who we got the referral from. But really, once a referral comes in, we take in kind of the initial information, like tell me what it is that you're seeing, what it is that is making you think something just isn't right here, or that someone is getting care that is different than someone else would have gotten in the same circumstance. And just talking through and taking some of that initial information. And then depending on a case-by-case basis, kind of also the clinical picture of some of our patients, because on occasion we have had patients who are very, very acutely and critically ill, and it may not be appropriate to speak with them directly. So we kind of make a clinical judgment of who else do we need to be talking to get more information about this case. Do we talk to the patient? Do we talk to their family? Do we talk to other consulting teams or other providers who have been involved in this patient's care? And so we really take the time to try to figure out who are the right people that we need to be talking to get as robust of a picture that we can of what is going on with this patient. And then we really try to have like real-time conversations with providers about things that we're seeing, provide that historical context, provide the experiences of our patients, if we have been able to talk to our patients and really kind of humanize them and provide that perspective, and provide then our recommendations on how to move forward with their care, focusing on health equity and providing the care in a way that is shared between both the team and the patient, and also recognizing what each person is bringing to the table, so that we can have that shared understanding and come up with a partnered plan. We do occasionally document, not occasionally, most of the time we will document in the chart. And if it's not documented in the chart with our recommendations, we certainly will go over them with the referring provider and the teams, and try to provide that education in real time.
The only thing I'll add is that at the end of the day, we're hoping our patients are expecting to feel advocated for on behalf of, to feel heard. A lot of times we're not here to, make the rules, change the rules, create the rules, all the time. I think there's some systemic things that, we certainly have been helpful with and involved in. But, here we're here to guide and really consult with folks to recognize what are some of the interpersonal things, the historical things that are all showing up today, and how can we consider that as we talk about that next family meeting that we're going into, or are we talking about a referral to that next provider? Can we consider these aspects of their life while we make these decisions jointly? So hopefully our providers too, they feel some support, they feel empowered to have these discussions as well.
So let's actually provide a little bit more support for our faculty and staff. Are there suggestions that maybe the three of you, maybe we can just do a quick roundtable here at the end? Is there any piece of advice you can give to faculty and staff that will help them ensure that they are providing healthcare equity for all of our patients?
Oh gosh, I think I just go back to these grounding principles that we have. We are in such a fast-paced environment. Healthcare is fast-paced. We are just go, go, go. And I don't think we get an opportunity in our days to really just take a moment to stop, reflect on where we are individually as people, and then also where our patients are coming from. And so I think my advice, as simple as it may be, is to even find those 2 minutes in your day that you can slow down, take a deep breath, ground yourself and center yourself, and why you became a healthcare professional in the first place, and slow down a little bit to really take the time to listen to your patients and their families. Again, it is, we're not set up as a healthcare system to always have that time to pause and ground ourselves and reflect. But I think that has always been for myself what, really helps me in being able to have that openness and authenticity to hear where my patients are coming from.
Well, I'll add by, coming from, as a social worker, we have a clinician, like a mental health lens. And, we talk a lot about, for example, anxiety, right? Or, and with anxiety, we have to fill in the blanks sometimes. Like something's making us anxious, maybe it's some uncertainty, and we kind of fill in this story to help us feel a little bit better about, what we do next, right? Or depending on what's going on. So let's apply that to clinical work too. A lot of times we're human. We don't necessarily have all the answers, and we much less don't have all the answers of our patients and families in their lives, right? So a lot of times we've also seen that biases come from this uncertainty, this subjective interpretation about what's going on around us. And while that inherently is natural for us as humans, natural for our brain to process in that way, we also have to recognize that there could be some harms that come from that, some things that inadvertently are misunderstood or miscommunicated or what have you. So if we can also take time to seek that objective information. Do we need to call up a colleague, that may know this person very well? Do we need to call health equity? Maybe we pull in another provider just to make sure we have as much factual information that we need to move forward with the clinical decision or a treatment plan, but of course, including that person, that patient as well, so then they can articulate maybe the gaps that we're missing in their care. So seeking that objectivity in the face of subjectivity is huge when we're talking about discretion and biases, again, that are so natural for us. Let's use it in a way that is helpful, that makes sense, and that doesn't continue to cause harm.
Yeah, I mean, the medicine I think is really good for, being able to diagnose. We have amazing innovation to help get to the bottom of physical problems and name them. We also need to try and get accurate with people, right? And that might ask us to expand a little bit of our understanding of why things are the way they are. A lot of times, and this is, the bigger picture of how medicine is affected by what's going on in the larger society. And, we just came through Juneteenth, for example. It gives very clear, like the symposium gave very clear historical reasons of why society looks the way they are by laws that have been passed to exclude some people, include and build up others. And that's part of the history of our country, and it informs the way that we interact with people, the value we put on people. So there's a lot of aspiration that we need to sort of uplift the human dignity, human spirit, that even though people are coming from different scenarios and disadvantages, we might not have been the cause directly for that, but we're benefiting from that. We're benefiting from certain people being able to build more wealth because of legal laws that have been put in action, so that people are healthier. They're healthier because they had more resources. And so when people come from poverty, instead of placing blame, perhaps we should look at the reasons why, what are the strengths that people have had to endure? It's like the show Survival or something sometimes, I've literally come in cases like, what? You don't have water in your house? How could that be? But it's because of historical, structural, legal things that have been in place to hold people back. And again, a lot of people haven't been the direct cause of that, but that's what they're inheriting. And we can do better by acknowledging, and bringing that dignity, restoration back into different spaces that we're doing healing work, that we're engaging in good healthcare with people, giving more access, giving more balance and accuracy.
Yeah, I love that perspective. Thank you so much, Priyanka, Sam, Kamau, for your perspective on medicine in general, society in general, and of course, the Healthcare Equity Consult Service. I really appreciate it. Now, though, Kamau, you still have one more job to do. It is time for the lightning round, and we ask one of our guests 4 quick fire questions. Are you ready to go?
Why are my colleagues laughing? What's going on? What's going on here?
We love you, Kamau.
You will be great.
They know what's about to happen. All right, so what is the most common misperception surrounding the role of a spiritual care chaplain here at Michigan Medicine?
That we just go around and say prayers, and that's what we do at the end of life. Yeah, prayer is a ritual that many people appreciate at the end of life, but a lot of what we do is listening to the hearts and the souls of people in part of their healing process or grieving process from a spiritual angle. That meaning that sometimes can't be explained by other aspects of society can be explained through the human soul, the experiences of, faith, the experiences of mystery. So we're here to listen and come from that perspective to help people in their healing process. It's a part of dealing with life, and so we're fortunate to be witness to that.
All right, so if you hadn't gone into spiritual care, what is one career you would have wanted to pursue?
I would be a permaculturist. Do you know what permaculture is?
I have no idea what that is.
Permaculture is it's a person who looks at patterns in nature and becomes a steward of those patterns for human benefit. For example, observing how water and land interact and creating environments in which the earth can be more productive as it already is in human benefit, to build soil, to build water conservation, to build overflow and abundance rather than scarcity and dead soil. And, like pesticides to make things naturally healthier and more abundant.
Now, I have to say, I've asked that question several times. That is the most specific answer I have ever gotten. And that was fascinating. Thank you.
Obviously, Kamal shops in the organic aisle. Is that right?
Clearly.
When I can.
All right. Well, this week is the official start of summer. What are you most looking forward to over the next few months?
Being warm.
You don't get it too long here, right?
Warm. I like Michigan is, green, it's warm, it's beautiful. So just enjoy and bask in the glory of summer.
All right, now this is the most important question yet. Friday is National Detroit Style Pizza Day. So are you into Detroit style pizza? And if not, are you into pizza at all? And what is your favorite style?
Well, Detroit has a very large Muslim population, which has a specific type of dietary food, kind of like kosher. It's called halal. So you can get halal pepperoni, all the pork products that you would usually avoid, you can get them halal, like whatever, chicken, beef, pepperoni. So I do enjoy pizza. I enjoy pizza, but I don't know what Detroit style pizza is exactly. Could you school me on that?
Yeah, it's like, so Buddy's is the one that most people think of when it's Detroit style. It's almost like a French bread pizza. It's like a thicker crust. The cheese goes right to the edge. It's delicious. I feel like Buddy should be paying me right now, but
Yeah, no free ads.
I'm gonna say, I think, Dan, we know the answer for you for this
yes,
question.
absolutely. Do you like it?
I do.
There we go.
I am not originally from Michigan, so it definitely was a change when I got here, but I do like it.
You're gonna have to initiate me into the Detroit pizza
club.
I'm not gonna say cult.
Having your spiritual care advisor into a cult, that would be a change of pace here. Well, thank you so much, Kamal, for your insight and your very enjoyable answers. And thank you to both Priyanka and Sam for joining us as well and letting us know more about the Healthcare Equity Consult Service. If you want to learn more about HECS, go to mmheadlines.org. That's mmheadlines.org.
All right, and while you're there, you can check out other featured stories from this week, including a look at 3 recent environmental awards won by U of M Health, and information on the important holiday of Juneteenth, as Kamau touched on a little bit just a little while ago. Find all that and much, much more at mmheadlines.org.
Dan, we asked Kamau what he was most looking forward to this summer. What about you?
So I'm sort of in the same boat as him. I like the warm weather, but for me, it's not even necessarily the temperature. It's the length of the day, the sunlight, especially being here in Michigan, so far west in the Eastern time zone, and it like stays light until 10 o'clock. I love that. You can go on walks after dinner, If you run into neighbors, it's still light out until, all hours, it feels like. So that's actually my favorite part about the summer. What about you? What are you looking forward to?
I mean, I'm with you on the daylight. I would say one thing that I appreciate about Michigan summers is definitely that, people summer pretty hard here because it is so short. And I like traveling and sometimes I leave, and go out of town and stuff. So you can't go wrong in the summer here.
Yep. All right, it's time for the weekly trivia contest. This week's question is, which organization presented U of M Health with 3 environmental awards in recent months? Once again, which organization presented U of M Health with 3 environmental awards in recent months? You can find the answer at headlines, and once you know it, send it to headlines@med.umich.edu for the chance to win a prize.
That is all the time we have for this week. Thank you again to Kamau, Samantha, and Priyanka. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks as always to our listeners and viewers for everything you do for our patients, families, and each other. We'll see you next week.